Hello, 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 and welcome to Useful Idiots. I'm Katie Halper, and I'm joined by.
Aaron Maté is my name.
How are you doing, Aaron?
I'm good. Good, Katie. How are you?
Good, thanks. How was your weekend?
It's good. I'm visiting my parents in Vancouver, so that's been fun. And it snowed here, which is always awesome in Vancouver because everything kind of shuts down and it's beautiful. So yeah, it's been nice.
So that's always good. Yeah. Yeah. So a little change of scenery, a little change of background. Uh, it's not that Aaron got too big from Useful Idiots and had to move locations to escape the paparazzi. That's not what's happening at all.
Not yet. Not
Not
yet.
yet.
Yeah. I'm planning for that stage.
Yeah.
Where
This is a test run.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. How was your weekend?
Good. I can't even remember what I did. What did I do? I guess it was good. Oh, I started watching a really good new show,
Which one?
Chestnut Man,
Chestnut Man. Okay.
on Netflix. It's Danish. It's really good.
Huh.
It's a thriller.
Huh.
If you don't like violence or gory stuff, you're not going to like it. That's all I'll say.
Okay.
But if you do like it, it's really good.
Okay.
Yeah.
So for our squeamish audience, stay
Yeah.
away from Chestnut.
Stay away from Chestnut Man. Yeah.
Everybody else, dive in.
Dive in.
Yeah.
Seriously. I binge watched it a bit. So should we let's get into it. We always have a lot of stuff because we, of course, respond to on Monday mornings. We respond to the Sunday morning shows that we watch, so you don't have to. There's always a lot of embarrassing footage. So let's start off with a clip of our dear beloved Mayor Eric Adams on our dear beloved Face the Nation.
Welcome back to Face the Nation. We turn now to the mayor of New York City, Eric Adams. Good morning to you, Mr. Mayor.
Good morning. Good to be on with you.
Thank you. You have said that somewhere around 70% of hospital beds in your city are currently occupied. Are the hospitals close to being overwhelmed?
No, not at all. My daily briefings with my healthcare professionals, had one earlier today. They stated that we are stable and they're doing an amazing job. And those.
Okay, just one thing to note. Note how much he uses my and I and me. Okay, a lot of possessive. And also note that he's going to use the word pivot and keep that in mind. Okay.
No, not at all. My daily briefings with my healthcare professionals, had one earlier today. They stated that we are stable and they're doing an amazing job. And those heroes and sheroes who are the nurses and doctors and hospital employees, we just need to really commend them for the job. And we're watching this closely, and we're going to make sure we respond and pivot as COVID continues to do so.
Well, we wish you luck with that. You have the largest school district in the country in your city, of course, and you have been very clear you are keeping schools open. To do that, you've given out N95 masks, required staff be vaccinated. Everyone's got to be masked. You've got air purifiers, you've routine screening, but you're not requiring a negative test before students return to the classroom. That's something they're doing here in the District of Columbia. Are you confident you can keep the level of transmission low?
And it's so important that you laid out the things that we put in place.
See what he did right there? That's called a pivot. He's showing, not telling, right? He says they got to pivot in response to COVID. He pivots in response to questions. All right.
Because COVID is a formidable and moving target. And we have to pivot and shift based on that. And our policies have been rooted in, I need my children in school.
Okay.
I need my children in school.
That's his policy. That's the policy right now. The policy is Eric Adams needs his children in school.
All of New York City's children are Eric Adams' children.
Yeah, exactly. And they're all heroes and sheroes.
That's bold.
And if my medical professionals tell me, Eric, we have to do a mandated vaccine, we're going to do that. But right now, we have brought over 1.5 million tests in our schools, as you indicated, N95 masks, as well as other resources and tools. And we have been doing an amazing job because of one thing, coordination and communication with our UFT and other agencies involved. And I believe we're doing the right thing for our children, having them in the safest place, and that is in the school building.
He's also a big fan of like jingle slogans and mottos, so coordination and communication. He also said earlier, I think in his first speech in his new term, that we were gonna GSD, get stuff done.
That you're talking about the union there, but you've kept schools open, but the plain fact of the matter is people are still going to get sick. And I know you have had some staff shortages as a result of that. Attendance in school this past week was about 70%, so about 300,000 out of 1 million students missed class. Are you going to have to elongate the school year to make up for all this?
You know, I'm so glad you said that because I think many people are missing. There was an amazing article in the New York Times.
Okay, that's like his third pivot. To be fair, that's what these people do when they're on these Sunday morning shows. By these people, I mean guests of Sunday morning shows. They pivot, but he's a little bit less. He like skips a beat. There's usually like a some kind of segue, but he's just bold. He just boldly pivots. All right.
That stated this is the first time we spent more time and energy around protecting adults than the future of our children. I'm troubled that we almost had a 2-year loss for our children. They're behind math, behind in English. We're going to sit down with my new chancellor and stated, how do we start?
We're going to sit down with my new chancellor. Now that's just confusing grammatically.
That sounds kind of like My Little Pony, you know,
my new
chancellor.
Yeah,
it could be like a toy line.
It could be, yeah. Or it could be a little pony, but wearing, I don't know how you dress it up as a chancellor.
What is the chancellor robe? Yeah. The chancellor's usually in a robe of some kind.
Is that true? Chancellors are in robes?
In my experience, when I come across a chancellor, they're usually in a robe. I'm thinking of it in like a university setting.
Oh, yeah, right.
You know,
maybe this is a cultural thing. Maybe this is a Canadian thing.
Right. Maybe the Canadian chancellor is more robed than
than the American one. Yeah.
Doing to catch up because remote options are not really being used and can't be used correctly for those children who don't have access to high-speed broadband, need the meals that they need. I know we have to look at a different way of living with COVID each time a new variant comes out, and one area is education.
But you do have these staffing shortages, as many schools are seeing around the country. The federal government says they're giving out plenty of money for you to hire people to come in. But how do you get someone to take a job as a teacher right now in the middle of a pandemic at a low wage?
Well, we need them in, and our teachers are paid accordingly to a great union contract, and they get the support that they deserve. And we need to attract people to do what I like to say, teaching is a calling. We're not just trying to make sure we fill a job applicant. No, we want the best in front.
You know, my problem with this question is like, it is not really up to the mayor.
Yeah.
How to fill education jobs. That's a federal funding issue. And it'd be cool to see this pressed to say like Joe Biden or a senator who's voting for billions of dollars for the Pentagon.
Right.
That's who needs to be asked that question.
Yes.
Not, I think, Aaron Adams, who is relatively little control over such a big question.
True.
Of our children.
Right.
And what we have done successfully here in the city is
it's kind of a big deal. He said our children, not my children.
That's progress.
That's a pivot.
Pivot and shift based on the needs.
Oh my God, he literally just said pivot and shift. Okay, that's funny.
And how COVID is changing. We must learn to live with COVID, and we have to do it in a safe way.
Well, we may have to live with it, but for the infection rate, when I look at the New York State Department of Health report, which I just did, it said potential increased severity of the Omicron variant may also play a role in increased rate of hospitalizations for children under age 11. What makes you confident that Omicron isn't causing bad outcomes in kids when the state makes this point?
Well, let's look at something else the state and city is stating. A child is 4 times more likely to be hospitalized if they're not vaccinated. So I am saying to my parents
Major
and
pivot
the
there.
people of New York, get vaccinated and get booster shots. We don't have to feel helpless like the beginning of this virus in 2020. Science and global communities came together. We now have the tools that we need. So let's empower ourselves with the vaccination and booster shots.
Right.
If we do that, we will bring down those hospital rates. And that is what I'm encouraging parents to do.
But some parents are just not vaccinating their 5 to 11-year-olds, that younger demographic. But what about kids who are 4 and under? They don't have an option to take a vaccine, and that is where you're seeing the fastest growing infection rate, according to the New York State Department of Health. Are you going to keep daycare facilities open? Or are you going to keep preschools open when those kids can't be vaccinated?
Yes, we are. We're going to continue to do what we're doing, coordinating with our healthcare professionals. When you start to disrupt the stability of child care, of daycare and education, it has a rippling impact throughout our entire city. Parents can't keep their children home. They have to work. The economy is also part of this crisis that we're facing.
Oh, really?
And with the proper balance
Had no
of
idea.
creating a safe environment inside our daycares, our schools and other locations, our parents can go and do the jobs they need to do. And that is what I must face in the city. We have to ensure the financial ecosystem is healthy, as well as our children and our families are healthy at the same time.
Mr. Mayor, we'll be watching. Thank you for your time this morning.
All right, so that was interesting. A lot of pivoting, a lot of I mean, I'm glad he was so forthcoming about how much the economy is related to this, because of course he talked about the ecosystem, and he famously a couple days ago mentioned, while talking about the ecosystem, he said low-wage workers, my low-wage workers are part of the ecosystem, and they don't have the academic education to sit at a desk, which was one of the reasons that he had to keep everything open. And, obviously the answer to all of this is paying people to stay home, or paying people who can do their jobs remotely, just letting them do it remotely. But Eric doesn't want to wait.
It's tough stuff. It's, and unfortunately with the system, it's everyone gets pitted against each other. Everybody with legitimate concerns gets pitted against each other. Teachers have such a legitimate concern about protecting themselves and protecting their students.
Yeah.
Parents have legit concerns too. I mean, Adams is speaking for, I think, a sizable number of parents who are seriously impacted if schools are not open, and kids are impacted too if schools are not open. It's not good for them. It's just like in a society where it doesn't provide the basics for its citizens,
Right.
the citizens get pitted against each other, and it's just kind of
point.
It's hard to watch. By the way, when the host says like we'll be watching, I don't know. I mean, I guess that's like a fair thing to say, but if somebody ended an interview with me saying we'll be watching you, I don't know. I'd be a little freaked out.
Yeah.
Like, okay.
I think Aaron has some Stockholm syndrome with Eric Adams.
Maybe.
Yeah. Anyway, well, the really important stuff is just I'll be watching how much he uses the word pivot, how much he does pivot, and how much he uses the me, I, and my, because that's pretty amazing.
Maybe I'll start appropriating the first person for vaccines too. Like, I need my vaccines to get out into my parents, into my kids.
Yeah.
And I need my ventilators.
Family.
My hospital beds need to be free.
Yeah. Anyway, so that's Eric for you. Let's pivot actually to the we have another vaccine related thing, but I think we need to shake it up a little bit. How about we watch let's go to Adam Kinzinger.
Dr. Gounder, I want to talk about the CDC message.
Oh no, not this one. Sorry, we're skipping this one, Wilson. We're going to the Kinzinger one for now.
We moved to the January 6th committee, and I know you're always very hesitant to get in front of the chair and the vice chair, so I'll get that caveat out of the way. If you got no more information submitted to this committee right now, how much of the story do you think you have?
I think a significant part. I think where we're at right now, we know a lot of the narrative. And as I've said, I think the most important thing is not even the day of January 6th, it's what led to it.
I love the question and the answer. How much of the story do you think you have, talking about January 6th? And, he's like, we got a pretty substantial portion of the narrative. Like, since when did federal congressional investigations become about like telling a story, storytelling?
Yeah. How much of your talking points are in order?
Yeah, creating a narrative. Like, I thought you're supposed to be investigating, like doing an inquiry, trying to come up with some major revelations that could even lead to criminal charges, because that's the whole point here. But more, it's like in terms of your plot points. Have you broken the second act yet? Are you still sort of figuring out the?
How's the arc?
Yeah. I'm still in the early stages of the arc.
Yeah.
We have a lot of what's out there in the public venue, what the president himself said, the fact that he was watching for 3 hours on TV, probably gleefully while this happened. So I think if everything shut down today, we'd be able to put out a powerful and substantive narrative. We still have more information, obviously.
Powerful, substantive narrative, great character development, huge revelations at the end, a pretty big cliffhanger.
Yeah.
We're going to leave them wanting more for season 2.
Yeah. Big payoff. I think this is season 2, actually. Russiagate is season 1. January 6th.
All right.
Is season 2.
But let me try to
what will be season 3? Any predictions?
Oh my God. I don't even want to imagine season 3.
All right. We'll leave you guys on that cliffhanger then.
Yeah. They even, they even didn't take a season off. Like after Russiagate, they did Ukraine Gate. That was kind of like an interim that pivoted right into COVID and January 6th.
So this is actually season 3. All right. Season 1 was Russiagate. Season 2 is Ukraine Gate, and season 3 is January 6th.
Everybody forgets season 2. It's kind of like The Wire. It's
exactly.
Like that was people's like least favorite. Although I thought it was a great season.
I thought it was great. Yeah.
Everyone forgets that. No one, season 2 is the most forgettable season in many people's eyes, and that's kind of what Ukraine Gate was. But now we're back with January 6th.
Yeah.
And it's still going 1 year later.
It's still going. Yeah.
And it will never end.
Thing you don't have yet that you really think you need, a witness or that you really, or you need to understand that would make this a stronger report?
I think the one thing that if I could wave a magic wand and have more information on, it would certainly be what did the president know about January 6th leading up to January 6th? And I think what's important is it's the difference between was the president absolutely incompetent or a coward on the 6th when he didn't do anything, or did he know what was coming? And I think that's a difference between incompetence with your oath and possibly criminal. That's where I want to get more information. We do have obviously some things.
Okay, not to nitpick, but that's not a parallel grammatically. Incompetence with their oath and criminal. The difference between incompetence, that's a noun and adjective. Anyway, not the biggest crime.
You're a tough customer, Katie Halper.
But I want to know, because I am, is this guy incompetence with his grammar or his syntax or criminal? That's
things
my
leading up to that, but the more information we can get, obviously, the better.
Yeah. So in other words, we've been saying for a year that Donald Trump incited an insurrection, and we've putting out innuendo that not just that, but also he was involved in plotting the insurrection somehow. In terms of our actual information about what we've been alleging for a year, whether we actually we have nothing. We have nothing.
That's a work in progress.
Yeah, it's a work in progress.
We're still in the writer's room. We're still developing that in the writer's room. Yeah.
And again, I'm sorry to repeat myself, but last week I think I made this point that there already is a sprawling criminal inquiry going on by the DOJ. Actually, the DOJ brags it's like the most extensive criminal case in U.S. history. It's going on. So whatever this House inquiry can find, the DOJ can find actually with far more efficiency, because they have criminal powers that the House just doesn't. So what this really is creating content for another season for Democrats and their neocon allies in the Republican Party, like Liz Cheney and this guy, to basically distract the public with and scare the public into supporting the national security state. Even though, by the way, this is the same national security state that failed to stop the riot.
Right.
So it's like which is the question that these people are not asking. Their inquiry is not looking into how did like the world's premier, supposedly premier law enforcement agency not anticipate nor thwart this calamitous riot at the Capitol. They're not asking that question because they're not interested in actually doing real oversight.
Right. They didn't not. So it was an interesting combination of not thwarting it and also shooting someone and killing them, shooting them in the neck and killing them.
Ashley Babbitt, which they also don't care about.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
Which again, it's just a weird, it's like two extremes or something, like ineptitude and lethal force. I guess that's actually a good description of most of the criminal justice system, of most of the law enforcement system as it happens in the United States.
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah. All right, let's go to the next clip. Should we go to chapter? Let's see, that was season 2. Should we go to season? I guess this is season 1 and 2. It's like a reunion episode, the next one that we're gonna see, because it's. I guess it's. Is this Russiagate or Ukrainegate? Russiagate, right? Just Russiagate, but involves Ukraine.
Well, Ukrainegate was the sequel to Russiagate, so they're very tied, and Ukraine is, it's what's happening now with Ukraine is sort of it's very much a sequel to the Cold War mania that we've been seeing in the U.S. for at least the last 5 years, and arguably longer. But let me also actually plug one thing in terms of January 6th. It was a great article on January 6th. Is the guy whose chair I'm sitting in, Matt Taibbi, at his Substack, has a great article about how Democrats welcomed Dick Cheney at the commemorations of January 6th, and just what a farce that is. And he points out that Cheney's assaults on democracy were far more damaging than Trump's, and I agree with him on that. But now Cheney's being held up by Democrats as like the model Republican, which is just insane.
Insane. Yeah, that guy has a lot of blood on his hands. So much blood. Yeah. Let's go to the second Russia-Ukraine clip, or the one that's just the overview. Aaron, can you put your other headphone in? Because I hear a little feedback, but maybe that's, not feedback, an echo. Yeah. Okay, let's go to the short Russia clip, Wilson.
The crisis in eastern Ukraine, where Russian forces appear poised for an invasion. Tonight, U.S. and Russian officials will begin talks, with the Biden administration already saying they're open to limits on NATO military exercises or missile placement in the region if it will help diffuse tensions. Our Holly Williams reports from Ukraine.
Good morning. Here in eastern Ukraine, they've been fighting against Russian-backed separatists since 2014, and trenches like these now carve up this part of the country. The conflict has turned farmland and villages into killing fields, and more than 14,000 people have lost their lives, according to the Ukrainian government. Now, this winter, there are fears of a Russian invasion. Tens of thousands of Russian troops, up to 100,000 Russian troops, according to one count, are massed along Ukraine's border, and alarm bells are ringing in Washington. Now, according to some, a ground invasion involving tanks and artillery and armoured vehicles is unlikely until the ground here freezes over. But here in the trenches, they've told us they think that it could happen at any time. The big question is what Russia's president, Vladimir Putin, is thinking and what his true objectives are. He claims that Russia is a victim of Western aggression, and he's demanding security guarantees in return for defusing these tensions, including rolling back NATO troops from Eastern Europe. But here in Ukraine, some people have told us that President Putin is essentially playing a game of chicken, a Cold War-style game of brinkmanship that is ratcheting up tensions, trying to extract concessions from the US and its European allies, and thereby perhaps extending Russian influence here in Eastern Europe.
I can't keep track of how many games Putin is accused of playing. So she says here he's playing a game of chicken and brinkmanship. There's also, this is the most common one, he's also playing a game of 3D chess, where somehow Putin is this constant mastermind who can see ahead of everybody else. And like the common line throughout Russiagate was, and like Google this, see Putin is playing chess and Trump is playing checkers. That was like the most common one.
Oh yeah, that's a good one. Well, Putin should be praised for not just playing chess, but playing chess while playing chicken. He's playing a game of chicken chess. He's
multifunctional. He's ambidextrous.
He is ambidextrous,
Yes.
More than ambidextrous, because it's like what would that be? Tridextrous.
Tridextrous. Is there like a technical term for someone who is able to play multiple board games at once?
I don't know. Maybe there's a Russian word for it.
There probably is.
Yeah,
it's probably a Russian. Yeah, those are Russians.
Maybe it's just called Putining.
Now, last year, the US government gave Ukraine nearly $500 million in military aid, including anti-tank missiles.
And we need more. We got to send more. This is an average, and the people who make those anti-tank missiles sponsor this show, and this is effectively an advertisement for more of those. Let's send them more.
I like her hat.
President Biden says that if Russia invades, the US will respond with, quote, severe consequences, economic consequences. But he has ruled out sending in US combat troops. Margaret.
Is she wearing, what, is that like a hat that like jockeys wear when they ride horses? What's going on with that hat?
Yeah, it looks like that.
What's this? Is that a headlamp?
Yes, or it could be a camera.
Oh, a camera. Got it. It's like a GoPro on her head.
Could be. Yeah.
Anyway, well, she's wearing a bulletproof vest. That's good.
Yeah, I mean, that's a fair thing to wear.
Oh, yeah. No, not mocking her for that. Not knocking her for that. They should have full body bulletproof, though. Why vest? Why not like full metal jacket, except full body proof, bulletproof jacket? I'm just putting it out there.
That's tough to move around in, but yeah.
It is tough to move around. Yeah. But they look like those like little kids, you know, little toddlers when they're wearing their cute snowsuits. It would be like that, but bulletproof.
Yeah.
All right. I like her mittens too. It's kind of a funny juxtaposition of mittens with bulletproof vest. Like quaint and kid-like, and then, you know, wartime, war zone year. You know that mittens apparently keep your hands warmer than gloves?
I did not know that.
Yeah.
That's fascinating.
Because there's more, for some, like, because your hands create the heat. Maybe I'm wrong about this. Someone told me this in college. I probably should fact check it. I can't, you know what? This is hearsay for now. This is just a theory. I can't stand behind it. But yeah, something about your body heat is uninterrupted by cloth.
I believe that.
I
believe in body heat, the power of body heat. I believe in it. I think that's very plausible.
We're believers on Useful Idiots. Okay, so let's go to the next Russia-related clip. This is a good one with friend of show, Tony Blinken.
Start on these talks beginning tomorrow in Geneva. President Putin demanding that the U.S. pull some troops back out of Eastern Europe and rule out expanding NATO to include Ukraine. Are either of those on the negotiating table?
Neither of those is on the table, Jake, but here's where we are. There are two paths before us. There's a path of dialogue and diplomacy to try to resolve some of these differences and avoid a confrontation. The other path is confrontation and massive consequences for Russia if it renews its aggression on Ukraine. We're about to test the proposition about which path President Putin's prepared to take. We have important conversations between us starting tomorrow, as well as at NATO, as well as at the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe. We're going.
By the way, count the number of times that on the table or off the table is used. Okay.
We're going to listen to Russia's concerns. They're going to have to listen to our concerns. If they are proceeding in good faith, we think we can make progress in addressing concerns on both sides that would reduce tensions and deal with improving security. We'll do that in close coordination with European allies and partners. We've made very clear to Russia that there's going to be nothing about Europe without Europe. But ultimately, this is up to President Putin to decide which path he's going to follow.
It seems unlikely Putin will.
Can I say one thing?
Of course.
This is just a couple of days after Blinken, at a State Department news conference, accused Putin of, quote, gaslighting. So Blinken, this grown adult, actually accused a foreign head of state of gaslighting, using like a younger person's term.
Right.
I know that Jake Tapper was never going to ask a critical question of Anthony Blinken when it comes to, like our wars and proxy wars abroad, like Ukraine, but at least grill him on gaslighting.
Yeah, just ask what he meant by gaslighting.
Yeah, and also why are you as like however old
a non-millennial
using the term gaslighting about a foreign head of state?
Yeah,
it's just so pathetic. It's so embarrassing. It's funny too, but he's not going to get
that's gaslighting. He gaslit the nation.
Absolutely, he did.
Yeah.
I mean, and he just looks perpetually. If I'm using the term correctly, gaslit himself. Blinken always looks freaked out. He's just scared out of his mind.
Yeah, he does.
And like he's trying just him relax. He does look like
he looks like he's blinking. He's not blinking. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
He's
exactly.
a deer in the headlights. He's not blinking.
Exactly.
His eyes are open.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Will withdraw troops or take at least some of them off the border without some concessions by the U.S. You've already said that those two that I mentioned up top are off the table or not on the table. What about moving heavy U.S. weaponry out of Poland, moving it further west? Or what about moving missiles? What about limiting the scope of U.S. military exercise? Are any of those on the table?
Look, first, Jake, I don't think we're going to see any breakthroughs in the coming week. We're going to be able to put things on the table. The Russians will do the same, both directly with us at NATO, at the OSCE, and we'll see if there are grounds for moving forward. But here's what I can say. First, any progress that we're going to make is going to have to happen on a reciprocal basis, by which I mean if the United States and Europe are taking steps to address some of Russia's concerns, Russia will have to do the same thing. Second, nothing's happening without Europe. And third, it's hard to see making actual progress as opposed to talking in an atmosphere of escalation with a gun to Ukraine's head. So if we're actually going to make progress, we're going to have to see de-escalation, Russia pulling back from the threat that it currently poses to Ukraine.
Mm-hmm.
So this is where, look, I mean, you're never going to get any legitimate or accurate background to what caused this whole crisis on the Sunday news shows or on any of these cable networks. They all take the U.S. state party line because they really are state media. And Katie, can I take like a minute just to give some background there? So basically, look, what is missing from this discussion are some key facts. So first of all, and there's some debate about this right now, but it's pretty established from the documentary record that to end the Cold War in the late 80s, early 90s, the U.S. and all of its allies promised Russia that NATO would not expand 1 inch to the east, so would not expand any further to Russia's borders than Germany, because, you know, to end the Cold War, Russia allowed Germany to be reunified, which is a pretty big concession in itself, because remember that Germany was, you know, the country that attacked Russia several times in the 20th century, including, of course, in the Second World War. Right. And we all know the consequences there. So for Russia to allow the unification of Germany on its doorstep was a pretty big concession. And in return, NATO, including Secretary of State James Baker, pledged to Russia that NATO would not expand 1 inch further to the east. And that was a pledge that was immediately violated by Bill Clinton and every U.S. president since. So that's like the deep background. Then you have Ukraine 2014, which was this coup. It's called here a democratic revolution, but basically that was the U.S. You know, John McCain, Victoria Nuland, who's now who was a senior State Department official under Obama. Now she's back under Biden, and they basically backed a coup in Ukraine that ousted a President Yanukovych, who was like, he's called pro-Russian, but really he was trying to play both sides. He wanted to make an agreement with both the European Union and with Russia. He wanted to make everybody happy. The European Union and the U.S. basically told him, no, it's either us or it's Putin, and that led to, we're not going to be a
side piece.
We're not even going to share you. We're not going to share Ukraine, and that's the whole point. It's like it's neocons in Washington and the war profiteers that they serve. They can't tolerate just having Ukraine be, you know, the divided country that it is. There's a big part of the country that identifies with the West and a big part that identifies with Russia. Those are the regions that are actually rebelling right now with Russia's help. So instead of just letting Ukraine be neutral, a country on Russia's borders, formerly a part of the Soviet Union, you have a huge contingent in Washington, which both Jake Tapper, Blinken, and every Republican, except for, I guess you could maybe Trump, represents, who want to basically make Ukraine like cannon fodder for a proxy war to put pressure on Russia. So it's, from Russia's point of view, it's actually Russia that has a gun to its head, because you have the U.S. arming Ukraine. You have talk of Ukraine joining NATO. There's a formal pledge from NATO for Ukraine to join, and Russia wants that rescinded. And here you have Blinken dismissing all these concerns as just Russian aggression. And of course, Jake Tapper never challenging any of that. It's completely inverted.
Right. This is all Putin gaslighting us.
This is all Putin gaslighting. And imagine, look, does Russia have troops on U.S. borders? Is Russia trying to bring Mexico into a hostile military alliance? I mean, if the U.S. was doing any of the things that it accuses Russia of doing, then if Russia was doing any of the things that the U.S. is currently doing, that there'd be the threat of nuclear war. I mean, the U.S. would never tolerate it. Look at the freak out that we had for 4 years over Russia allegedly stealing some emails and putting out some dumb ads on social media. It was like national panic. It was being compared to 9/11 and Pearl Harbor. So just imagine
it was the latest Pearl Harbor.
I mean, just imagine if Russia was doing anything close to that, actually here surrounding in the U.S. sphere of influence. It just would never be allowed.
Right. And in fact, I'm looking for this clip. It's related, where Blinken said something about like once Russia gets in there, it never leaves.
Yeah, when Russians are in your house, it's hard to get them to leave.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, how many countries does the United States still have bases in?
Well, it's over 800 bases around the world. And in terms of the troops, U.S. is occupying Syria, Iraq. They're in Germany. They're in South Korea. I mean, they're everywhere.
Yeah. So we're not the most polite guests either when it comes to overstaying.
No.
Our invitations, which we never had in the first place.
And that is, I mean, talking about gaslighting.
Yeah, seriously. Just wanted to make some corrections to some know-it-alls in the chat. I know that gaslighting was not a term invented by the youth. Millennials overuse that word. That was our reference. They have basically made that term lose all meaning. It's, of course, a term based on an excellent movie called Gaslit. It's called Gaslight. It's an excellent movie, 1944, Charles Boyer and the amazing Ingrid Bergman, and I highly recommend it. And I don't want to tell you why it's called that because I don't want to give away the plot, although you'll probably be able to figure it out. Another thing is, I know Full Metal Jacket doesn't refer to a jacket. Thanks. Very within
That's
my
an important
comments.
correction.
Yeah.
Shout out to Missy Kin, who encourages everyone to hit the like button.
Yes, guys, what are you doing? Hit the like button.
You've got to smash the like button.
You got to smash it right now.
Yeah.
We got 1286 people watching, and thank you for tuning in. We need at least 600 likes because I guarantee you that not half of you are hate watching this. I'm sure. I'll be generous. Let's say half of you are hate watching this. That still gives us 600 likes. Okay, let's keep going.
Didn't rule any of those out, which doesn't mean you're going to do them, but just they're not off the table as the earlier items you said were. So let me just ask you, going forward, if those concessions are a possibility, you must be worried about creating a precedent in which Putin at any moment can throw 100,000 troops on a border and threaten to invade a country until the U.S. gives him at least some of what he wants, the very scenario you referred to when you said Russia had a gun to Ukraine's head.
Yeah, there are troops on Russia's border. Putin can't move his troops pretty much anywhere except his own border. And the reason they're on his border with Ukraine is because the U.S. is sending, a lot of heavy weapons there and fueling a stupid proxy war that, by the way, there's already an agreement to end. And this doesn't even get mentioned here by Jake Tapper, but there's something called the Minsk II Accords reached by France, Germany, Ukraine, Russia, and it already lays out a pretty simple solution. It basically allows for autonomy for the Donbass, these Russian-speaking regions of Ukraine that are rebelling against the Ukrainian government. They've been doing that ever since that 2014 coup I mentioned, and it calls for autonomy there, but staying as a part of Ukraine and other de-escalating measures. That's already on the table, and the U.S., if it wanted to, could easily tell its Ukrainian client to agree to just follow the Minsk II, the agreement that's already signed.
Right.
But it's not doing that because it doesn't want actual peace. It doesn't want a solution. It wants to fuel this proxy war in a bid to gain some more leverage over Russia, just basically using Ukrainians as bullet stoppers for a useless war and as an outpost for U.S. military contractors to make even more money. That's really the missing part here, is that there already actually is a solution that the U.S. is right now deciding not to follow.
Right. And why are they deciding not to follow that?
Well, I mean, there's a huge lobby in Washington that makes a lot of money off of tensions with Russia. It's a great way to justify the existence of NATO, to have constant conflict with Russia, because really there's no other reason for its existence. There's a historian named Richard Sakwa who has a great book called Frontline Ukraine, and he coined this term that NATO exists to confront threats created by its own existence. I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but that's basically what his argument is. And it's true. I mean, there's no other reason for NATO. It's a Cold War era alliance designed to confront the Warsaw Pact, which is no more. So why does it exist? Well, it exists to basically justify military expenditures in NATO states. And that's why when NATO was expanding in the late 1990s under Bill Clinton, there's a great article in the New York Times. You can look it up. And basically, it just talked about how congressional lobbying from the weapons industry set records at that time to encourage people to vote for NATO's expansion because it was such a boon for the weapons industry. So it's about that. It's also just about, anywhere that can be used to expand U.S. hegemony, the U.S. will pursue that, and they'll create some kind of fake crisis and make it look as if the other side is the aggressor, when really, as I was saying, with the Minsk II Accords, the solution's already there.
All right, let's go back to the videotape.
It's exactly the opposite. First of all, why are we here? We're here because repeatedly over the last decade, Russia's committed acts of aggression against neighbors, Georgia, Moldova, Ukraine in 2014, and now the renewed threat about Ukraine today.
Okay, Georgia 2008, that was George W. Bush and John McCain encouraging Georgia to launch an attack on Russia to reclaim some or to claim some territory. Russia responded, and the Bush administration, realizing that there was no way it was going to actually go to war with Russia, sold out Georgia, and Russia won that. But that conflict would not have happened had George W. Bush not encouraged Georgia to attack first. And a similar thing with Ukraine 2014. Again, the U.S. backed a coup. There's a leaked videotape, and look it up if you haven't heard it, of Victoria Nuland, who's now serving again under Joe Biden as a top State Department official. There's a leaked phone call of her talking to the U.S. ambassador to Ukraine, and they're literally choosing the next Ukrainian president. They're choosing the person who is going to replace the ousted Yanukovych, who at that point was coming closer to Russia. And Nuland says, yeah, Yats is the guy. We're going to go with Yats. And actually, they're talking about how Biden is going to oversee the whole thing. So that's the part of this history that we're not allowed to talk about, and instead portray the U.S. as an innocent bystander to Russian aggression.
Is this the one where she says, fuck the EU?
Fuck the EU, exactly.
All right, let's see. I think, should we watch this clip? We have it. It's not
if
that
you have
long.
It, sure, yeah.
Let's see. Hold on, let me see. All right, this is good. Yeah, I got it. Wilson, I'm going to send it. Hold on. Where's that? Whoops, sorry, 1 second. Can you hear that when I'm playing it? No.
A little bit, yeah.
It's a little bit. Let me make sure hold on 1 second. Let me make sure it goes to my mic. All right, now let me do a share screen. All right. Okay. Let me play this.
When you're a high-ranking official talking about diplomatic efforts in Ukraine, the last thing you want to do is drop your guard.
So that would be great, I think, to help glue this thing and have the UN help glue it and, the EU.
But that is exactly what reportedly happened between U.S. Assistant Secretary of State Victoria Nuland and U.S. Ambassador to Ukraine Jeffrey Pyatt. The exchange has since surfaced online, including the crude swipe at the European Union. The audio clip of a woman and man, said to be Nuland and Pyatt, hears them discussing strategies to work with the three main opposition figures.
I don't think Cleach should go into the government. I don't think it's necessary. I don't think it's a good idea.
In terms of him not going into the government, just let him sort of stay out and do his political homework and stuff. I'm just thinking in terms of sort of the process moving ahead, we want to keep the moderate Democrats together. The problem is going to be Tony Book and his guys. And, I'm sure that's part of what Yanukovych is calculating on all of this.
I think Yats is the guy who's got the economic experience, the governing experience. He's the guy, what he needs is Cleach and Tony Book on the outside. He needs to be talking to them 4 times a week. I just think Cleach going in, he's going to be at that level working for Yatsenyuk. It's just not going to work.
There is a suggestion for Nuland to contact Klitschko directly to play to his top dog sensibilities. while Newland refers to getting the United Nations involved in a political solution. And that's where the unfortunate comment arises.
I'm obviously not going to comment on private diplomatic conversations, other than to say it was pretty impressive tradecraft. The audio was extremely clear. Hello, how are you? Good to see you. We're here from America. Would you like some bread? Please take something.
Thank you for coming. She's like, no, it's okay.
This was Newland and Pyatt visiting Independence Square in Kiev in December, handing out food to protesters and police.
I like that the first one didn't even take it.
Is embarrassing for the US and allows Russia to argue that the opposition is being manipulated by Washington, something that Barack Obama has always denied.
Yeah, of course he has.
It was said to have been posted online by the Russian deputy PM, but that has not yet been confirmed.
That's quite a get.
I mean, look, so imagine a similar call, like Russia deciding who is going to be the next president of, I don't know, Canada, or, you know, somewhere right in the U.S. sphere. It's crazy. And, you know, when she says in that clip, Yats is the guy, well, guess who became president of Ukraine? Yats. The U.S. was all over this coup from the beginning. And that call just confirmed what was obvious at the time, that the U.S. was engineering a coup because Ukraine was trying to basically stay neutral. And that wasn't good enough for the neocons in Washington. And now, like, everything we've seen since is the result of that. And the question is Biden going to be finally willing to de-escalate a little bit, to finally admit that, like, the U.S. can't control everything that Ukraine does and shouldn't be using a country on Russia's borders as cannon fodder. It's bad for everybody.
Right. Also, there's a bit of a Nazi-ish thing happening in Ukraine.
There is a major Nazi issue where there's parts of the armed forces, of the security forces in Ukraine, that have a heavy neo-Nazi component, and that's who the U.S. is taking sides with.
Yeah.
In keeping with, you know, a long record of siding with Nazis around the world, including the Nazis in Germany after the Second World War, who the U.S. helped bring to Latin America to impose fascism and death squads there.
Right. Yeah. It's funny. It's like, we don't like white supremacists here. That's what Trump likes, apparently, right? That's the narrative, that Trump is the white supremacist guy. Not saying he doesn't, like, you know, he's made a lot of comments that he's done a lot of dog whistling. But it's funny how the Nazis in Ukraine are okay.
Absolutely right. That's a great point. The Ukrainians and Nazis are the Nazi Ukrainians are so great that we have to support them and even give them weapons. I mean,
right.
And there's even photos.
If you find a Nazi, you got to arm the Nazi.
Yeah, and there's even photos of U.S. forces training with the Azov battalion. It's a big scandal.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay. So, did we finish that clip or no?
I think we're good with blinking.
Okay.
We've seen.
Oh wow,
enough.
yeah. Okay. Let's go to the next clip, which is let's go to reliable sources. The Stealth.
Monday morning fan favorite.
Yeah.
The Stealth.
Truth about the Trump riots is causing a ruckus within the Republican Party's ranks. It's really an intramural fight within the walls of the GOP and within the walls of the GOP media. Some Republican leaders and voters are not afraid of the facts about 1/6. They know what happened. They know how bad it was. But many Republicans are in denial. They are telling new big lies to cover up the crimes of that day. That's how you wind up with fringe websites peddling conspiracy theories about the FBI. That's how you wind up with Florida Governor Ron DeSantis saying the DC, New York media treated the 1/6 anniversary as their Christmas.
Okay, they did. He's right. DeSantis is a terrible governor, and he happens to be right about this.
Do you know what Christmas is?
Okay, dude, as a fellow Jew, you can't, I'm just going to say, it's not our place to question whether a Christian knows what Christmas is.
Do you know? He sounds so indignant too. Like, do you know what Christmas is? Do you know what Christmas means? It's when Santa Claus.
I know.
Gets the presents.
Yeah, it is Christmas to them. I think Brian doesn't know the way that Christmas is used.
It would be awesome if, like, DeSantis like clapped back and like this became like Brian's Jewish CNN liberal host Brian Stelter questions whether I know what Christmas is.
Christmas planes.
Yeah. Do you know what Christmas is, Brian Stelter?
Not that would be okay. We're definitely discouraging that. I only said that as a Jew. I'm saying I wouldn't Christmas plane personally. Okay.
And the very best expression of this internal warfare is Carlson v. Cruz. Tucker Carlson forcing Ted Cruz to apologize for calling the Day of Terror a terrorist attack. Cruz had used the same phrasing many times before, but one day after Carlson called him out for it, he folded and begged the Fox audience for forgiveness. Carlson was explicit about his reason for challenging Cruz. He said, Ted, you're helping the other side. You're helping the Democrats.
Why'd you use that word? You're playing into the other side's characterization.
I was talking about people who commit violence against cops, and you and I both agree, if you commit violence against cops, you should go to jail.
Yeah, but you're not a terrorist. You know, you're not.
Cruz v. Carlson is the cringiest.
All right, it's kind of I mean, I'm not a Tucker Carlson fan, but where's the lie there? You could be a terrorist attacking cops, but that's not the definition of terrorism.
Yeah. Max Blumenthal had a great term for what he saw at the January 6th riots, because he was there. He called them the Ku Klux Clowns. And I think that's a much better term for the rioters at January 6th than terrorists, because, correct me if I'm wrong, but no one's even been arrested for carrying a weapon or charged with carrying a weapon.
Right?
They trespassed there, but they were, there was violence and people did attack cops, and that should be punished. But it's like this idea that this was this armed insurrection and a day of terror, as Brian Stelter says, is a joke. It is. Yeah. I mean, these were people who, this was these were MAGA heads riled up that they have been fed Trump's lies, but this was not a terrorist attack. And it's funny that this is like still a year later, this talking point. And we saw it. I mean, I don't know if you caught any of the January 6th commemorations, but
we talked about it last night on the Katie Halper show.
It's pretty funny. It's pretty funny. Yeah. Like Kamala was like likening it to Pearl Harbor and 9/11, and we all saw Nancy Pelosi introduce Lin-Manuel Miranda.
Oh, that was amazing.
It was pretty amazing.
Yeah. And I just like seeing this intra-right fighting, I do have to admit. I mean, like Carlson and Cruz. Cruz is such a wuss.
He's such a wuss. He is
such a wuss.
Yeah.
No, what were you going to say?
Well, he's been humiliated so many times. Remember, he on the campaign trail, he was like so vituperative against Trump. He was so anti-Trump, and then when Trump won, he started kissing his feet.
Oh yeah, in fact, we have a clip of that. Well, let's finish watching this, and then we'll play that other clip.
It's an example of a daily tug of war. Among the majority of the American people, 1/6 is a settled issue. They know it was violent. They know Trump was at fault. But among Republican voters, this is very much unsettled. In this poll, about 4 in 10 Republicans say Trump bears at least a moderate amount of responsibility for the riot. So some get it. You have Kurt Anderson on Twitter saying it's the sane or decent GOP minority that understand that the election was legit and that the rioters were incited by Trump. So you have this schism within the party. It's a really interesting intramural fight. How much to blame Trump, whether to call it terror. But you know what? No other Fox show followed up on that spat. They never covered the Cruz interview. One of the most incredible things that happened in politics this week, and they ignored it. Like, that interview is going to go in history books about what happened to the Republican Party, and Fox just pretended it didn't happen. This is what always happens on Fox. They ignore their own role in driving the GOP.
All right.
But it was on Fox, though. I mean, I'm sorry to nitpick, Brian, but the interview was on Fox.
Yeah.
So at least they did the interview you're talking about.
Right.
I don't know. Is that like should they be covering? I guess he has a point that like it was a pretty explosive exchange, and so it's funny to ignore it. But I don't know. At least it was on Fox.
Yeah, it was on Fox. Maybe there's I guess he wanted other Fox News shows to cover it. Sure. Fair enough. I mean, yeah, probably not the most egregious thing that Fox has done.
Definitely.
But let's watch this clip of Ted Cruz, big ally of Donald Trump. Let's watch this clip of him
You're a sniveling coward and leave Heidi the hell alone.
He is laughing at his supporters. He's mocking his supporters because he's lying to them.
Do we get behind a campaign that is based on yelling and screaming and cursing and insults?
Do you want to turn on the television and see a president, Republican or Democrat, who embarrasses you?
This man is a pathological liar,
A caricature of a braggadocious, arrogant buffoon.
Morality does not exist for him. A narcissist at a level I don't think this country's ever seen.
I am honored that President Trump is here endorsing and supporting my campaign, and I look forward to campaigning alongside him in 2020 for his re-election as President of the United States.
What an empty shell of a person. Also, the beard is absolutely atrocious. I don't know which is worse, actually. Seeing more of his face or seeing his pathetic beard?
Great question. That's a great question.
Really good question.
It's a tough
right?
one.
Yeah. So that's just embarrassing, that evolution or devolution. I mean, someone going after your wife, you probably should never campaign for them.
No. And the way Trump did it was so mean too. It was just disgusting.
Yeah.
And, but that, these people have no soul. When you have no soul, you can do anything. You can transform overnight. And that's what Ted Cruz did with Trump. And that's what he'll continue to do.
He's such a ghoul. Anyway, so what else? What did we learn today? I think we learned a lot. We actually have one more clip. Let's play this last clip, this CDC related clip from Meet the Press.
Dr. Gounder, I want to talk about the CDC messaging issues. And
this woman is a former member of the Biden COVID advisory council.
How much of this is on the CDC or how much of this is on the White House? Look, we've seen just in the month of December, I want to put up here, on December 20th, we were told to stay at home until after 10 days have passed since your positive viral test. A week later, people with COVID-19 should isolate for 5 days. No mention of whether you should test negative before getting out of that. Then on Tuesday, the best approach is to use an antigen test towards the end of a 5-day isolation period, says the CDC, although the CDC director 2 weeks ago sort of dismissed whether antigen tests are worthwhile there. How much of this is on the CDC and how much of this is on Washington, if you will?
Chuck, this is a great question. I think all of us could have done a much better job from the beginning of saying, look, the one and only thing you can count on is that the recommendations and guidelines are going to change over time. That is the one thing you can count on. But let's take this example of isolation policy. Yes, the CDC came out with rather confusing, in a sense, overly tailored advice, trying to please and fit its advice for every single possible setting: healthcare, schools, travel, the general public. So yes, the CDC could have done a better job, but there are many other parties that contributed to this issue. You have, first of all, the FDA, under both the Trump and Biden administrations, has really dragged its feet on authorizing these rapid antigen tests for the purpose of assessing are people contagious or not. Many of us have been advocating for that. They have yet to do that. We have real world evidence that the rapid antigen tests are a good measure of contagiousness, but the FDA has not authorized them for that purpose. And just like with vaccines, the FDA has to authorize, then the CDC makes recommendations about their use. Then you have the manufacturers, the private sector. They have not been manufacturing enough rapid tests, and the White House and the administration certainly.
Okay, we're going to get some chunts right now. Those are of course, as people know, the grunts from Tuck Chad. Also, what is he doing to his face with his hand?
Could have done more earlier to work with the private sector to create a more stable demand by putting in large volume orders. And then finally, on the back end, you have the private sector, everyone from Walmart to healthcare systems that are willfully misinterpreting the CDC isolation guidance, saying, oh, well, now you have to go back to work at 5 days. That guidance is to indicate who is infectious, who's contagious, who's a threat to others, not when you're well enough to go back to work.
So as predicted, obviously, places like Walmart are abusing this. I know. They're abusing this, and maybe he wants to speak and he has to bite his fist so he doesn't.
Yeah, he's like, oh.
they're abusing this to make workers go back to work, which is what a lot of us were afraid of, and a lot of us thought that the CDC adjustment or update was based on that. You know, the fact that Delta, not the variant Delta, but the airline company, their CEO was recommending 5 days, but at least they had the decency to include testing in that. And then the CDC picks up the 5-day thing. Meh, why test? You don't have to test. So that's just it's interesting seeing people who were on Biden's COVID council. Some of them are coming out and criticizing the policies, as they should. So, by the way, I know that person, that Matthew guy, is going to make a clip of this, me saying it's not terrorism. I'm talking about the people who were there, who weren't violent, and yeah.
Matthew, make the clip of me too. It wasn't terrorism. I'm sorry, it wasn't.
Yeah.
It was a riot. It was a riot.
Right.
It was messed up, and it was some people, some officers were attacked.
Right.
But this was not terrorism. This was not a coup. I'm
right,
sorry.
It wasn't a coup. Yeah.
In fact,
and terrorism, I mean, it can involve, it's true that attacking a cop, I'm not recommending it, but that in itself isn't terrorism. It can be terrorism, but that in itself isn't terrorism. And in fact, what usually defines terrorism is the attack on civilians. But you can be doing both. It's just not a guarantee. They just don't necessarily go hand in hand. Yeah.
Yeah. And let me say this too, this is the same Congress that, months before gave Juan Guaido a bipartisan standing ovation when Trump, for a State of the Union address, brought in Juan Guaido, the puppet who the U.S. is trying to install in Venezuela, and causing a lot of harm to do so. I mean, putting Venezuela under crippling sanctions that are destroying more than 90% of its economic output. Juan Guaido got a standing ovation from the entire Congress, including Nancy Pelosi, who stood up behind Trump and gave Juan Guaido a standing applause. That's how much the U.S. Congress cares about political violence and it cares about defending democracy. So to hear now all this sanctimony about the seat of democracy was attacked, this is a place that doesn't care about democracy anywhere, including in the U.S., but especially around the world, against any country that wants to go its own way, that wants to be independent of U.S. control. I mean, that to me is real political violence. That's a real coup. But of course, it doesn't get talked about because it's completely normalized across party lines. And so while there's a split amongst Democrats and Republicans over this 1 4-hour riot at the Capitol, there is complete uniformity over far worse acts of political terror and coups everywhere around the world, such as in Venezuela.
Right. That's true. Yeah. All right. Well, yeah, that's actually interesting. And of course, the question is, as you pointed out, Aaron, how many have been charged with terrorism? And none.
Yeah, none now. And like the Q shaman, the shaman guy.
Yeah.
He got a long time in prison. And what did he do? I mean, he walked in, and there's that video of him where he's like, "Cool, this is awesome."
Yeah.
And it's like they had like that weird exchange with the security guard. He's like, "Guys, do you mind not doing this?" They're like, "Okay, yeah, don't worry. We're taking care of the place." I mean, that really was what the bulk of the riot was. And they can't find anybody to accuse of taking part in an insurrection because this was just a riot.
Yeah.
It was a riot. And but of course the Democratic base has been told for a year now that this was like, a Pearl Harbor style attack. So people are out there for blood, and it's going to get increasingly awkward. It's kind of like Russiagate, where MSNBC viewers were primed to expect that like any day now, the smoking gun was coming, the collusion evidence was coming, Mueller was going to lead Trump out of the White House in handcuffs, and it just never came. And they're setting themselves up for a similar situation here now.
Right. Yeah. So we're not downplaying it. It was a serious thing, but it just was used as Christmas. It was disproportionately, I would say, the way it was covered did not reflect what it was. Right?
Yeah.
All right,
yes.
Cool. All right. Well, guys, thank you so much for coming. And we will see you next week. We'll see you later this week for a regular show, but we'll see you for Monday morning next week.